Every revolutionary act is an act of love. And this is an act of love.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? All right, so we are going to have a fun conversation talking about values and what drives you. And sort of sometimes, if you're someone who's really driven by values, you come to a head where you have to make a decision whether to pursue a certain direction of your work. So we'll start short just by introducing yourselves to folks. And we can start with you, Allison, and then just go around and then we'll start the discussion.
I'm Allison Bross-White. I own B Resale over on Eat Street next to the donut shop.
I'm Joe Horton. I'm a rapper, writer, other, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm Davis-McGee, and I am an attorney.
I'm Adam, creative director, multimedia artist, partner over at Plot Gallery in Uptown.
So I always forget to introduce myself. So I'm Julia Nekessa Opoti, and I'm a journalist, radio producer, host. And so my next question is actually something that I've experienced myself. So if you can think of an example of a tough decision you had to make about your values, that you had to stop and think, and could you share, and then I'll come back later and tell you mine. You wanna?
Yeah, sure. So I own a used clothing store. I worked for Target for a few years, and knew corporate America wasn't for me. I like to call my store a nonprofit right now, even though it's been 5 years. I pay employees, but I don't really pay myself on a regular basis, and I think a lot of it is because I can't ignore my values in terms of there's almost this underworld of the used clothing and thrift store donation society or business. Like I could buy bulk from Salvation Army and pay them a penny for an item or something like that, and then resell it to you for $10, $15, $20. To me, that's not what I want my store to promote. So it costs my bottom line. Like my whole goal is to reuse, to help the environment, and also to encourage people to stop consuming so much. So the idea of bringing your clothes in and trading them in for new clothes versus continuing to keep going and buying new clothes is more of my goal. And even just ordering jewelry wholesale from China makes me cringe every time I place an order, because that's not going along with what I believe 100%. But somehow I have to keep my business afloat. So that's one of the ways I bend on my values a slight bit to bring in stuff that I can get more margin on just so I can keep running my business. So I feel like that's a daily business decision for me.
Yeah, so I just came back from visiting Portland, and it was very fascinating to see every corner there was a used clothing store. And they sort of have this culture where people resell their clothes, and so it's no one is hardly buying new clothes. And so that's interesting that I thought Minneapolis actually had a strong resale of clothes, but not really. Yeah, what about you, Joe?
Yeah, I can't really think of sort of a singular moment where I was confronted with this choice that I had to make between my values and not, sort of bending or whatever, but sort of in the same idea of like how you run your business and just the day-to-day, because that's more where I'm confronted constantly by this sort of, I call it like a gravity or something like that. Like there's this pull really to do these behaviors that sort of have to do with the political reality of the world right now, like posting online every day. If you look at most successful musicians, most rappers in particular, and you follow them on Twitter, you follow them on Facebook, you literally will be inundated with posts, like every 2 seconds, because that's just the way it has to happen. And I think there's so much noise and there's so much chatter out there that I really just don't want to contribute to that. And so I'm probably sacrificing views, plays, all the sort of little ways that people are monetizing their music right now. I don't have access to those things because I'm not wanting to add to that sort of digital noise out there. So not so much a singular moment, but more just a bit, how do I handle myself in the world, in the digital world that we live in today?
This is a good question. I mean, for me, I worked at a bigger firm, kind of a medium-sized firm, for like 6 years, and I gave them a really nice like box to check for their like, we are diverse because we have a queer person, and it worked for a while. I mean, they were like nice, progressive white people and straight white people, and they like it worked until it didn't work. Like I always think of like I bent this much and they bent this much, and then I just reached this point where it was like I don't want to ever have a conversation with a client and not be like, this is who I am, and like, you know, this is what my family looks like, and this is what my community is. And I just reached this point where it was like the pull to be who I actually am was more important to me than keeping this job. And so I left, and my partner and I had just had a baby, and it was like probably the dumbest move I ever made. But yeah, I mean, and so kind of from that point forward, it was like, this is who I am, and I'm gonna dress and be who I wanna be. And now, like, you know, it's not like it's a big surprise to anyone. Like, this is what you're gonna get. This is not a straight person. So it's easier now because I feel like
You've come into your own.
yeah, and my values are like pretty, you could probably guess them if you looked at me.
I probably would say in like the exact opposite regard. One of the decisions that I constantly go back to in my experience was like kind of fresh out of high school, going into college, where my value system was being reevaluated as like an artist and as a musician. I was rocking with the crew locally, and I had reached this kind of spiritual fork in the road where, you know, the church and our lifestyle were conflicting, and I had to, you know, the band was very successful, and we were doing this, but then I felt a certain way, and it's actually one of the things that, I mean, I really have, as an artist, just grown into. I don't have any regrets, but it's one of those learn from your mistakes kind of failure situations with your values. But I mean, it's definitely tied into sort of like the religion, spiritual component, and abandoning friends like that hold you down and as family and love, and like, and then you're like, I gotta go to church. And like, it's just so I always go back to kind of that as a maturation of kind of who I've become, because I no longer subscribe to those beliefs that I did at that time, but it was a major learning experience and challenge of value systems and building and growing.
Right, and so it raises an interesting question about how you end up making a living, right? Because there's so many opportunities that you pass up because, so I said, you know, earlier, I work in commercial radio, and I could have Target as an advertiser, and it might be a dumb decision, but I decided not to pursue them because on the one hand, I interview a lot of people who are exploited by Target, right? And I'm talking about workers' rights, and so here's a situation, I'm taking money from the very people that are exploiting. And of course, it's not very black and white. A friend of mine said that she needs to create a spreadsheet of all the places that I'm boycotting so that she knows where not to invite me. And so it's, you know, we can laugh about that, and we can decide to eat at home and decide not to go certain places, but there is a price you pay. It could be a paycheck, or it could be relationships, as you were mentioning. And so I'm wondering if you use your platform, you know, in what ways you use your platform to talk to the public about what you do and to advance that, and then if you see any pushback from people towards, you know, when you're raising your voices to speak on certain issues. And anyone can start, we don't have to go in line.
I sort of wonder, like when I ask myself that question, it starts with what are even my values and what do values mean to people in our culture right now? Because for me, it comes down to this like feeling that we're stuck in this sort of 50,000-year-long conversation that we forgot why we started the conversation in the first place. Like we're like, okay, we're gonna build this building so that we can build this bridge, so that we can drive these cars, so that we can do this. and the so that we cans just go ad infinitum, and I just don't. What are we even doing? Like, what are we doing? And so I think one of the more radical acts that we can do nowadays is to stop talking and stop, like everyone, stop talking and stop everything and just, like Combat Jack was up here and when he said he meditated every morning, I wanted to yell out loud because sitting down and just doing nothing is an incredibly powerful act. And so, yeah, I don't know, like and this is sort of like a little way around the question, but I almost sort of want to use my platform to promote silence, which is just so difficult and such a cognitive dissonance for me to do. It's like, how do I speak about silence? How do I advocate it? How do I tweet about it? Yeah, if anyone has an answer, just let me know, because I'm looking
Tweet
for
at
one.
him.
Sure. Yeah, tweet me. I won't tweet you back, but you'll get it.
I'm really shy in person, and I think I'm hilarious on Twitter. So, but nobody follows my personal Twitter so bad that I actually retweet myself from my business Twitter, hoping that people will pay attention to my personal Twitter. And still, nobody thinks I'm funny on Twitter. So I use my platform in terms of social media for my store to speak about social justice and issues that I think are going on in the world. My store is awesome and it has really cute clothes and I hope people like to come shop there, but I have way more followers on Twitter and Instagram than I do just on my personal Facebook or my personal Twitter. And I use that. I mean, you would get sick of seeing how many times I post Black Lives Matter on all of my social media, but that's important to me, and I think that it's my duty as a white person and a person who has a Black husband and a Black child to advance that cause. And since my son came into our world 2 years ago, I don't even care about fashion anymore. I don't care about what shows are playing, even though I used to. All I want to do is make a safe space for him. And so it's in your face, and I have lost all my filter on social media, and I don't care, you know. And so far, I haven't received any pushback from customers. My parents think I should shut my mouth, but they're Republicans, and so and they don't shop at my store. So, you know, for me, it's not even about finding a balance anymore. Like, we can't sit still, and I don't want to be silent because I feel like I can't. You know, it's, especially this past year, what's been going on, like, we all have to play a part and speak up at least about those issues that are going on right now. And so, yeah, you'll see cute outfits on my Instagram, and you can buy them if you call us. But you'll also see information about protests going on, or how you can help, or where organizations I think you should donate your money to, and all that good stuff.
That's really interesting you bring up that aspect of parenthood, because a lot of my work has always been at that intersection of education and arts and helping young people find their voice through those platforms. And I guess on one end, it's interesting when we start talking about the dynamics of education and the freedom of speech and like schools and classrooms and like that platform. You know, I think for me, I definitely like, I went to a majority private, it was a private school up until my senior year, and then I went to Purpose Arts High School, and it was such a different world. You know, the platform that we have, you know, as a gallery space and as creators, just helping those young people, regardless of their age, like be able to express themselves. But then it's like the pushback that they receive from like teachers or even sometimes their own parents is really interesting. And we have a lot of conversations around that. And I guess for me, the manner in which, you know, I try to help and support is by screaming louder too, you know, and bringing the conversations, like Combat Jack was saying earlier, hosting the conversations regardless of what the majority might view you as or view a situation as on the surface, giving them the space to be open and safe.
I mean, I had vote no on our windows, and you know, when that was a couple years ago. And it was just vote no, so vote no against the marriage amendment and vote no against the voter restrictions. And people came in for different reasons to say thank you, and they didn't know which vote no I meant, you know, but they were still coming in to say, to thank you, for, you know, for putting that in the window. And so you just, I mean, if I want people to spend money at my store, which I do, I also have to give back and be a part of the community, and that's my way of doing it, so.
Davis?
Yeah, for us, I mean, there's 3 attorneys in our firm now, and you know, when it was just me, it was pretty easy. It was just like, you know, I am who our firm is, and you know, kind of take it or leave it. I think all 3 of us have really similar values, but we have different things that are really important to us. And so for me, I make sure that before we take on a new client, all 3 of us kind of give the sign off on like, yes, we want to work with that person. Because I just don't want to ever put someone in a situation where, you know, they're working, like, where we are representing something that they don't believe in. And we're lucky because we have really awesome clients, and then they you know, tell other really awesome people about us. But another thing we kind of get to do, which is nice, is legitimize in a certain way some of our clients, because like, even though I don't look anything like a lawyer, like just the fact of being a lawyer, people take you seriously. And so for a lot of our smaller business clients, like people just starting out, or folks who are, you know, from underserved communities, or folks who are, you know, not used to kind of dealing with all the stuff that goes along with running a business, we take very seriously like the opportunity to like call and say like, this is so-and-so's lawyer, we're calling to deal with this. Or this is writing a letter to say like, and kind of never losing sight of the fact that like, yes, we should keep pushing back again. Like, it shouldn't matter that I'm someone's lawyer. Like, you should listen to this person because of what they're telling you, but using that privilege that we have to say like, yeah, we'll get this done for you, and like, we'll figure out like how we're gonna pay for it or what we're gonna do with it later. Like we are in that position where we can do it, and it's something that I make sure that all the attorneys in the firm kind of feel empowered to do with things that are important to them.
Right, and I'm curious, so for you as an attorney and then other folks, how you choose and decide who to take on as a client or who to collaborate with, because, so for me, for example, I will, you know, talk to someone and figure out, yeah, we're aligned, and then I'll find out maybe a year later that they have some messed up politics or something in their personal lives that is problematic. And how do you deal with that? Because people are ever evolving, that's one thing, but then there are also other ways that you decide, I cannot work with someone who's not politically aligned with me, whose practice is actually going against what I'm working towards.
Well, for us, I mean, we're lucky in the sense that we are both, that we do some, but we don't do a lot of like one piece of work for someone and then like they go away. We do a lot of kind of ongoing work with folks, and we get to kind of do business advising as much as we do like attorneying. And so for a lot of our clients, like if we uncover something that we're just like, oh, a lot of times we get a chance to tell them like, listen, here's why this is messed up, and like and a lot of times like, you know, people just say something or do something and that's not really where their values are or like what they believe. They just like are speaking out of like fear or ignorance or whatever. And so for us, we've had a few times where, you know, we've had someone who wants to work with us and I've looked at something about them and said like, this is not gonna work. And then we've gotten to know them a little, and I've said like, okay, here's the deal. We will take you on a trial basis, but here's some stuff you gotta clean up, and here's some things you gotta work on. And it's not, you know, legally it doesn't have anything to do with anything, but it's more of a like, from a PR basis, I don't wanna be associated with you. So if you're coming in, like, I wanna be proud to say you're my client. So you got to clean it up. But the nice thing is, a lot of folks are like open to that. So they're just like kind of like, oh, teach me what I should be thinking, or teach me, like, tell me how this isn't correct. So we do a lot of kind of, I mean, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, we have clients that just kind of are awesome and do great stuff. But every once in a while, we'll come across someone and it'll be like, there's something in there. You seem like you're terrible, but there's a little piece that's okay, and so we're going to give you a little test run.
You bring up a really interesting point that gets overlooked, I think, a lot nowadays with the various platforms. For the record, I don't hate social media. Like, I'm not trying to, whatever. Like, people are like, this dude really does not.
We're not.
I don't at all. But I think we need to sort of acknowledge some of the effects that it has on the way we communicate. And one of the things that I think often happens is that if there is a platform to speak to the public, we don't speak to each other in conversation. So the thing that you're saying that I really resonate with is like not writing somebody off or judging them harshly because of their beliefs. Because I literally so there's this thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately. It sort of bothers me. There's like this lack of compassion in the way that we speak to people that disagree with us, that I just can't deal with that. Like, if somebody came up here right now and they were like saying whatever they were going to say about me for whatever reason, even if the worst thing, like throwing the N-word out or whatever, I would hope, and I'd really try hard to still see that person as a person and to separate them out from their admittedly messed up views, and to try to dialogue and be like, this is why I think what you're saying is messed up. Because if you haven't had the opportunity to talk to somebody who has an intelligent line of reasoning for why what you're doing is messed up, you'll believe messed up stuff. Like, you will. Right. I used to believe super messed up stuff. This is a random story, but I used to believe, like, I thought that I could see auras because I had an astigmatism, and I didn't know what astigmatism was. So straight up, I was telling people like, yo, you got a green aura or whatever. And I went to the optometrist, and he was like, nah, man, you got a like curved lens. And I was able to change my belief system. And so the way that I draw my line, I can't believe I just admitted that. But the way I like draw my line about whether I'll work with someone or not is, one, how they take that conversation. So if I try to come to them like, yo, man, you should probably consider this, and if they're just not into that, then we can just separate. That's cool. I don't need to. There's 7 billion people on the planet. I don't have to be friends with everyone. Yeah. Well, I guess that's really it. If they're like down to just dialogue and really like connect and chop it up about the issue, then I'll mess with them. And if they're not, then I won't.
Yeah.
So I just like to be completely transparent. So I'm totally with you on those opportunities of raising consciousness, except like in this, and I'm sharing this because I just got hit with this in like the last week or two, dealing with a client that we're about to shoot a commercial for, and it's to sell a product that reflects a family, and we wanted to use an interracial family, and the client flat out, like as we worked the script, it was said no, and our team was pushing for that. So it's like, even sometimes it's like friends and we can do it, or sometimes it's like clients and we can raise, like the people are meeting us at that table, but like my team and I are still kind of processing this space and as creatives and working of when you're just confronted with blatant racism or whatever the dynamic is, and like and how do we, and like strategizing on how to raise consciousness even when the door's shut, or like, do you walk away from the check, all of those things. And so I'm with you on that. Like with friends and people, it's great to like, when they meet you there and those, but then it's like, how do we navigate that space, in our work?
So if I may ask, did you have an opportunity to talk to the client about this particular situation?
We had opportunities for dialogue, but time and scheduling, turnaround, all the different dynamics. It was definitely one of those, how far do we want to fight this battle? Like how long do we want to push it? We engaged it as strategic and as articulate as we could. And it's also like one of those things where it might not be, it's not the time or the opportunity as it's not as ripe as you would like it to be, to really go full. to go hard, I guess. Does that answer your question?
Right, and so that's, for you, for example, that's a financial and relationship cost, so whatever ends up happening. But I wonder too if we can talk about the emotional cost that that does have on you, because you're still processing it now, even though, you know, and how it will impact your future relationships with him and other clients.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess I'm still processing, and I don't want to use the word healing, but I am healing through it. Like our team it's a learning experience, you know, and it's, you know, it's something that it was one, our values were challenged, but then it's also like I recognize that, you know, I have my platforms, like I have where I can do I can make the choice of like compartmentalizing my freedom of speech or my freedom of expression and how I go about that. Like that's 110% my choice, your choice, you know, our team's choice. So it's like, again, what Combat Jack was saying earlier, like if you're starting to reach a moment of, what was the word that he used? Of not depression, but like kind of stress, but
Stress.
Anguish or whatever.
yeah, like if you, I haven't reached that for yet, you know, but I guess that would kind of be my threshold.
Yeah, so I just thinking of an example. Is this being recorded? So I wrote an editorial for the Star Tribune, and typically newspapers have the right to change and edit as they'd like. And this was around something to do with terrorism and Somalis and Islam. And I wrote to the editor and I said, I know this is an editorial. Please really be careful about the edits you change. For example, I said, whatever image you use, do not use images of Somali women, because the story wasn't about Somali women, but they always do that. Every time they do a story about young men, they will put images of women. And I said, the language that you use around race and religion, please let's go back and forth and determine how this goes. And the editor wrote back to me and he said, there's no negotiation, we'll publish it as we see fit. And I said, okay, bye. Not in very pleasant terms, but I did say that I was very clear. I gave them reasons, I gave them examples, I pulled out articles they had written in the past and language that they had used that was either xenophobic or racist or Islamophobic, and I said, this is the reason why I wanted my own language, because my name is going to be on this. It is an editorial, I'm not a reporter for the Star Tribune. And so, obviously, my relationship with them is soured. It's not the first time I've had a back and forth with them, but what that does then is that I'm not likely to use them. They're the largest paper in the state, but I'm not likely to use them. So that platform is gone for me. And it's not just me that it impacts, right? It impacts other people who would benefit from reading whatever it is that I had written. And so it's one of those things I feel like we can have conversations with people back and forth, but at the end of the day, if someone is not receptive, how does that impact your work, you know? And so I wonder if you folks have tips for people who are here, artists and entrepreneurs who want to use their voice and to be vocal. Are there ways you can tell them, especially when people ask you to censor yourself? Or, you know, like what tips can you give to folks to use in raising whatever issues they want to talk about?
I mean, you just can't be scared. You know, we don't have time for it. And so, I mean, we sell a necklace that says, fuck it. I mean, you just can't worry about what everyone else is
I need to buy that.
Thank you. We also have fuck racism, too. You know, it's just like, life's too short to worry about what people are going to think about whatever you have to say. I mean, if you think it's important, then you need to tell someone, or, you know, I mean, that it is what it is. You know, if you lose customers, if you lose clients, if you lose friends, if you lose family, I mean, you have to be willing to take that risk. right now, I feel like it's so urgent, especially for white people, to become allies and fight this fight, because the world is pretty fucked up right now, and this past year has been really hard. And it's our job to like pick up the weight right now. And so I can't be silent because I can't have my neighbor be silent. And it's just, there's no time for our silence right now. So that's my tip. I mean, and use social media. I'll be honest, even my friends, if they're only posting things about their life on social media, like where they went out or where they're on vacation, and haven't posted anything political or social, I'm like, you're an asshole. Like, this is your space to reach how many people? And yeah, your life is great. We love your baby. It's really cute. I post pictures of my kid. But like, there's other stuff that you need to be communicating and sharing. And your post might be seen by someone who didn't think about that. And like, then it starts a discussion. And if you know who Adam Levy is, he's a local musician. And I'm assuming most of his fan base is older white people. And if you go to his Facebook page or any of his social media, he is killing it right now. He's starting discussions. They're having threads. If people come on troll on his page, he's serving it right back to them. And he gets it. And like the rest of us need to catch up and get it too, else stuff's not going to change. And if you don't think that protest or social media or sharing articles has an effect, you can see with the changes that are happening that they do have an effect. I mean, the protests and the rallies that have happened this past year are making an impact. And so we have to keep it up, not just for racial, which is what I tend to always go back to, but for environmental or gay rights or, homelessness, whatever it is that you're passionate about. And dogs are important too, but like, there has to be other stuff,
What about Cecil the lion?
Yeah, the lion. I mean, I love animals, but there's other stuff too. So that's my biggest thing.
That not be afraid thing is that's the truth and a half, because I feel like there's sort of like two prongs to the question. Like the first prong is, if you have done your due diligence on one side to know that what you're saying is true, everything that comes out of my mouth is vetted. I promise you that. I've read up my ass and out my ass. I know exactly what I'm saying. And that doesn't mean that I'm like rigid, right? Like if somebody comes to me with a better argument, I will adopt it, which is part of the vetting process. And so then that's the one prong, right? If you've done that and you really feel like that's taken care of, then you have to speak fearlessly and with all the confidence in the world. You absolutely have to, because if you're afraid of your reputation, if you're afraid of what people are going to say about you, what people are going to think about you, honestly, like that is why, in my opinion, there's lots of reasons why the world is messed up, and that might be one of the main ones. Is that we feel like there's this social pressure to represent ourselves in a certain way, and that there'll be certain benefits to doing that, and if we just like walk the line, like everything's gonna be all good. But I gotta imagine for every person that's ever just like lived through life very safely and didn't say anything out of turn and made it to the end, and they are laying on their deathbed, the second before they die, they're like, oh shit, what did I do? Oh no. And there's no chance then. There's no chance then. So we have to be brave and we have to be fearless. And I can't echo the sentiment enough about like we really just don't have time. We live in the only time in the history of the world where we are literally actually dealing with the very real possibility of the end of the world. Very real.
And that's not this Saturday.
Yeah, it's not this Saturday, not that. Right. Everyone always thinks it, and everyone says, oh, every generation says that. We literally, actually are dealing with the possibility of the end of the world. So if we're holding our cards now, then just, I don't even know.
Right, but the question about fear, though, is because most people are conditioned to live within the comforts of the status quo, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at the education system, if you look at how we are disciplined in schools around the world, what punishments you get when you speak up, when you behave differently, when you dress differently, when you look different, is conditioned in us so much that for those of us who speak up, it is scary, because it's like for me, being a black woman in this country, me speaking up, people think that I'm a threat, that I'm gonna beat them up. And I promise I won't hit you. But every time I raise my voice or I show anger, even if it's on a status update on Facebook, people feel threatened. And I don't want to be a threat. I don't want to look like a threat. So I mean, I think it is legitimate that, you know, how do you develop that muscle, I guess, is the question. So not so much overcoming the fear, because the fear is always there. Anyone?
I mean, I think I'm not from the Midwest, so I'm from the East Coast. So I feel like pretty much all the time I'm like saying things that people are like, we don't talk about that. We're not going to talk about that here. But like, you know, if you're just ignoring something and you're not talking about, like for my clients, a lot of the time I tell them like, there's nothing to be afraid of. Like when a company takes a stand on an issue, like, yes, there are going to be some people that are going to, but like the million moms are like, you know, 1,400 angry ladies who don't have any power. Like the people, I feel like we live in a time when it's like there are more people on the side of right than more of your potential customers are on the side of right than on the side of like fear, and you just need to like take a chance and do it. And I think that, you know, companies that stand up for what they think in, or individuals who do, like that's who people want to do business with. Like they want a reason. There's a million different places you can go to get, you know, to eat or to buy your clothes or to whatever, but I feel like people really, you know, there's kind of this like hyper local, hyper aware movement where people can find out like what you're about and what you've given money to and what you've, so.
Yeah, although I don't know that most people are on the right side. They might think they're on the right side, but if we look at all evidence, in terms of, you know, whether it's employment discrimination, health disparities, all that stuff, it's back to the question of the status quo. I think most people are not on the right side of history.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are afraid, but I always tell clients, like, just, you don't want to work, like, you don't want to deal with those people, you know? Like, those aren't, they're not your customers. Like, the ones that, if you feel strongly enough about something, like, you don't want to work with those people anyway. You'll create a new audience of, like, there will be people to come that you'll want to work with.
Yeah, someone posted a photo, she was on vacation in Europe, of a business, and it had a sign on the wall, and it said, if you are, like, racist, sexist, homophobic, or just an asshole, like, please don't come in, we don't want you, you know? And I'm like, that's true. Like, I don't care. Like, if you don't like what I'm posting about social justice or whatever on my Instagram, then you don't have to shop there. I mean, it is what it is. To me, money is one thing, but the other stuff is so much more important. I mean, obviously, if I wanted to make $1 million, I wouldn't have opened a used clothing store, you know? So it's finding that balance of what's important to you.
Did you want to add something before I ask to wrap it up?
I guess I'll just throw out there that, I guess as far as advice goes, one of the things that was going in my mind as you guys were just talking about, the whole kind of intimidation of social media and finding, you know, your voice, and in the wide spectrum of all of us as humans, of how we conquer fear and speak out on that. It's just like, just to keep in mind that whatever your platform is, whatever your space is, be it an office, a cubicle, like just remember that it counts, like it matters. And you know, you might not be the person going toe to toe on like a timeline feed or like on a Twitter, but just, you know, put your brother in check, or like put your sister in check. Like my sister right here, she always like hands out these little mustard seeds to like people, and it's like, it really is like the realest thing. Like the littlest tiny mustard seed can, like, that's the whole metaphor of like growing into like a tree, and like fear, conquering fear and faith and all that. But just like on the opposite end, I guess, of just that massive like end of the world, like, and then it's just like, oh, just remember, just pick up your little stick and throw it at somebody if you want to, you know, like a little bit. It makes a difference. It can make a dent.
Yeah. And so before,
if I could just chime in on one thing real quick. This is a weird thing to like chime in, but I feel like it's an important caveat that hasn't really been mentioned, is that, so the thing you said about the status quo, it makes me think of this way that we think about power in our culture right now. We think about it as strictly a repressive model. Like, as if there are people in power and that there are people trying to do things, and when they try to do that, power squashes them down. So power says no, 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 no. But like power is also a productive model. It produces systems of knowledge, it produces systems of thought. And I think that fear really comes from all the different little nodes of power that have told us to behave a particular way that keep sort of society functioning nice and neatly. We all walk down the sidewalks appropriately. We know, we do all the little things that keep society functioning. And that really is the product of power. And I feel like the fear, there's this inherent fear. The thing that makes that power stick is that the second we step outside of line, we feel this anxiety about it's hard. It really is really difficult. And that's what I meant earlier when I said about this idea of silence. It's not silence on important issues, right? It's not like somebody gets gunned down by the cops and we just go look the other way. It's silence about this space for being reflective, to develop the capacity to stand the anxiety that comes with getting outside of the bounds of power. And that, to me, I think that's one of the most important acts that we can do. So when we're having the conversation about how do we speak out against the repression of power, we also need to be having the conversation about how do we counteract the productive effects of power within ourselves. And that's difficult. It's really, really hard, but it's important, I think.
Right, and that segues actually to the final question I was going to ask. What do you see Giant Steps doing collectively, as a conference? This has been going on annually, and with different people coming into the room, but also a lot of people always returning. How do you see collectively in speaking out or being a symbol of something as a conference, in particular in terms of values?
Does anybody know Grace Lee Boggs by any chance?
Yes.
So yeah, right on. Like, I feel like she has this really beautiful idea about how to become a symbol for the revolution and how to say what the revolution is. I was at somebody's house the other day, we were having dinner, and I was like, they were like, oh, wait till you don't have water, you're gonna be out in the streets with a gun shooting people, the revolution's coming, it's gonna happen. And I thought about Grace Lee Boggs, and I didn't say anything because I didn't want to continue that particular conversation, but in this context, I'll say that her idea that the revolution is an individual revolution, that there is a myth of society in our culture. Like, we aren't really a collective, we're individuals standing next to one another. And so I think that what we do as a collective is to remind each other of the beauty and miraculousness of our existence and to slow each other down. Because the speed at which we're operating right now is too much to keep up with. We cannot understand what's going on in culture. By the time we understand what's happening, culture has moved on to something else. And that just creates this total inability for us to steer the ship. We've lost it. We cannot steer right now. And so Giant Steps as an organization, I feel like any organization really should be reminding itself of its fantasy, it's not actually a real thing, and we should be reminding each other of this reflective space where the revolution actually does take place. It's a revolution of thought first, before it's a revolution of anything else.
It's funny they said when the water's gone. I always think when the cable's gone. When they take away people's cable, then there's going to be a revolution, because people will be pissed,
Did anyone else want to say anything?
Well, I think the fact that you said that people come back to Giant Steps, people are involved, I feel like it feels like a thing that kind of grows. There was this original idea that Suzanne and Manifest had, and then they pulled together the people they knew. And then, it always feels like after the event takes place, there are connections that happen that kind of keep going throughout, and then kind of pulls more people back in, which is something that I feel like, I don't know that there are any other conferences, event type things that do that. I think they do a really good job of creating a space that people want to be in, and having a good balance of now we're going to talk about practical whatever things, and then we're also going to talk about aspirational, the things you need to keep you going. And so I think, to me, that's always been the interesting thing about this event in particular.
I just think people need to show up. I mean, here at this conference, this kind of stuff, but just anywhere, like, and social media is great, but you have to step outside of the social media. So if you're always posting about social justice or racial issues or Black Lives Matter, then you should probably be at a rally. You know, like, it can't just be behind the screen. And you don't have to go to all of them, but you should be out in the streets meeting with the people and not just saying safe behind your computer. So, to me, it's about
I have
showing
seen
up.
people actually protest or say things about Black Lives Matter, but they're practical, you know, whether it's hiring
Yeah.
or, you know, the things that matter, they don't do the right thing. So, but do you have anything you didn't say? No? All right, well, thank you, everyone. This was a great conversation, lots to think about, and thanks for the work you're doing, and next year. Was that like an awkward ending?
I said if we would have stood up, it would have been less so. But I didn't stand up.
Check.
Oh, you know what? Can you hear me? So actually, we do have time for questions.
Hi. So my true confession, and many of you have heard it, is that I'm an insurance broker. So everybody has to have from somebody that has your back. But my thing is like on home policies, they all come with like a little bit of built-in coverage for guns. But I just kind of put it out there the other day, like, man, I do not want to insure anyone that specifically needs special coverage for their guns. Then the next client I get are the coolest 70-year-olds. They're the people I want to be when I grow up. And what the fuck? They've got guns, you know, that they inherited or that they have for hunting. And I'm going, okay, so much for me drawing the line. So what do you guys suggest about something like that, where you're trying to put a line in the ground or in the sand, you know, about an issue that you feel passionate and moral about, and then somebody that you love and adore comes and messes it up?
Anyone?
Don't draw a line. I mean, that's. I think that's sort of the point about compassion for people that we disagree with. Is it's happened so many times in my life where I've been like, anyone who does this is F them and da-da-da, and then I meet someone cool. And I feel like the sort of like, the thing that sometimes I feel like we forget, because I would consider myself very progressive politically, but the thing that the progressive movement forgets is that we can be wrong too. Yeah. So if people go, man, if people are gay, I don't want to talk to them, and we go, that's messed up, man, but I don't want to talk to anybody that owns guns. It's like, really what's wrong there is sort of typecasting people and saying that I'm right, everything I believe is right, I don't want to interact with anyone that disagrees with me because F them. To me, under any circumstances, is going to set you up to like eventually meet the cool 70-year-olds with the guns. And I'm just, that was a cool sentence. I've had egg on my face so many times in my life where I'm taking a policy of like non-lines. Like I'm just going to take everyone for who they are. And that doesn't mean you don't walk away from some folks, because you do. But like, there's always room for people that are on other sides of the issue being cool and right.
Absolutely.
Did you have other questions?
Check. Other questions? I'm ready to travel. All I need is a hand to guide me.
Well, I'd say too, in fact, to follow up on the question about progressives, I think we also don't allow room for people to get where we've got, because all of us have moved from places. And you talk Grace Lee Boggs, one of the things she talks about is how she changed her whole life. She continued changing and she continued evolving as a person. And I feel like oftentimes, because we get upset or we get hurt or the consequences are sometimes very real, we don't have that patience to allow for the growth of people. And it is important, I feel, because we exist, we coexist, we live next to each other, so we have to allow for that.
It's such a beautiful like thought. Just having patience with people and compassion with people that we think are wrong is so beautiful to me and necessary.
And difficult.
It's
And difficult. It's really hard. Yeah.
I was just gonna add forgiveness to that list. It's like so key, so key.
That might be the hardest one of the bunch, but it's really good.
Still no more questions? Well, thank you very much.